welcome today. By the way, everyone, I don't know if you know, but today is also the International Day for the Elimination of Race Discrimination. A few words about me. I am the Vice President of Networks here for Lean In Canada. How I came in to Lean In Canada is actually because of a very special book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. It's a book that I would say changed my work life, which is to say it changed my life. And I know many of you have also been impacted in the same way. And this basically put me on the path that I'm on today, which is realizing what I know today as my purpose, opening doors to equity. And I do that as a diversity and inclusion consultant in my day job. And I'm thrilled to have the honor of being your facilitator here today. We have an exciting and action-packed evening. We have 8 speakers lined up for you. We also have many of our Lean In board members, as well as from our city networks that are managing our chat. And so please feel free to, if you have questions, interact with them there. And we'll also, as I mentioned, if you have your phone handy, we'll be showing you the QR code if you want to go to the next slide. So have your phones ready to be able to interact. But in the meantime, the QR code and the link will just take you to our auction and donation site. So we have a couple of items that were generously donated by our board and our amazing national sponsor, the Bernie Group. And I think some of you are on this call today, so shout out to you and special thank you. But the most notable item we have in our silent auction today is a very special piece of art. So if we go to the next slide, we have a close friend and ally of ours. His name is Keenan D'Abreo. And Keenan is someone who I saw, next slide, at a conference. And he basically was an individual who I saw capture the day through his work. He will be creating for us a very special piece of art and basically memorializing that for that. He will we'll be checking in with him from time to time to take a look at what that art looks like. And you will be able to, through the QR code, be able to access the silent auction. There's also an opportunity there to make a donation to Lean In Canada. We are a not-for-profit organization and would appreciate any support that you have there for us. Go to the next slide. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that Keenan is available for hire, so please see the site for more details on that. And so we're going to dive into our first speaker, who happens to be next slide.
You can actually control the slide. I think that would be easier because I cannot see the slide.
Okay, let me do it. There we go. Our next speaker is Starrlee DeGrace. Starrlee is a proud First Nations woman and a member of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, and one of 2023's top 50 change makers named by the Globe and Mail's Report on Business. Very impressive. Congratulations. Starrlee is currently a talent acquisition partner for the Lucky People at TD Bank. And Starrlee comes to us with a wide breadth of experience that she has generously offered to share here today with us. So I'm going to welcome her here to the virtual stage. Starrlee.
Thanks.
Hey.
Juliet, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. So I'm thinking I'm going to hit you with the heavy questions right off the bat because we want to hit the ground running. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've seen a lot of studies and reports and people speaking about the burden of emotional tax that emotional tax that women face in the workplace, and specifically women who have intersecting underrepresented identities. I'd love for if you can share with us some of your journeys as an Indigenous woman today, and specifically how being an Indigenous woman has played into any emotional taxes that you might have experienced.
That's heavy. That's an understatement, I think. Thanks for the question. I think that I talk openly about this. I am just for myself, Starrlee DeGrace, I'm as Juliet mentioned, a member of the Chippewa Georgina Island First Nation, and today I speak to you from the Williams Treaty First Nations. Before I joined TD, I spent 18 years in the tech sector. And so when I think about the question that you asked, the multi-layered, the intersectional identity of being a white passing Indigenous woman, neurodiverse, all of those things play into who I am and who I show up as. And so coming from an environment within the tech industry came with a lot of weight. Sometimes, and I refer to it as weight, sometimes it is heavy, sometimes you don't notice. It becomes heavier during specific times of the year, things like International Red Dress Day, when we talk about Indigenous Peoples History Month, things of that nature. And so when I think about the emotional tax, I think about that particular weight. And so I've shared this story, you've heard it, Juliet, firsthand, but in the tech sector, it's the little things. It is not always these grand racial injustices. It is the small moments that add up. And I share that because it is having a name like Starrlee is something that weighed on me quite often. And so in sales, I would call clients and I would say, hi, my name is Star. And they would say, is that your real name? And the first time is okay. The 100th time it hurts. The 500th time it is, that weight becomes too heavy. And so I would try to change my name. So I would say that my name is Starrlee, which is my given name. But then it became when I would leave voicemails and say that my name is Starrlee, people couldn't recognize that. And I would get Charlie or Carly. And so that weight of being invisible really was something that would continue to weigh on me. So I, constantly wanting to share who I was, but constantly being felt as if I didn't fit in or I wasn't met with a place where I belong. And that was not because of necessarily my environment, but the larger, the larger environment that I was in really weighed on me. And then when I was really embraced my Indigenous identity and I was proud and I would share my name and over again was just like really proud about it, that trauma on demand is something that is that speaks to me. And that is, if I mentioned my name, but if you have one paper cut, it's okay. It's not a big deal. 2 paper cuts, not a big deal. 10 paper cuts. If I have 100 paper cuts on my hand, that could be unbearable. And then I potentially dip it in, vinegar or what have you, and it stings. And so I think about it's all those little moments that become unbearable. And then the expectation for the sole Indigenous person to have all of the answers. So that is just another layer of expectation that I like to reference, because again, sharing my story can be challenging. And then knowing that I don't know everything. I'm on a journey myself of self-discovery. And so I'm not the expert, and that I can go and do the research just as somebody else can go and do the research if they don't know.
Yeah, wow. There's so much to unpack there. And I appreciate everything that you're saying, especially, when we talk about that emotional tax side of things. I think a lot of us don't think about that on a regular basis, but it's that gradually, suddenly that you're mentioning that I think is very impactful. And I think a lot of what you're talking about is when you can be seen. So I guess the other side of things that I'd like to ask you about is about the being unseen and potentially what impacts that has on an individual and specifically yourself.
You're just coming with all the difficult questions, Juliet. So I think that being seen is one thing. You're absolutely right, and that comes with some challenges. Being unseen, and myself being a white passing Indigenous woman comes with its own challenges, because I can hide in plain sight, and so it's a bit of a unique challenge. As I mentioned, the multi layers of identity. And so when I come to any experience, I want to say, is it a safe place for me to be seen? Can I share my full self in that environment? And I have to sometimes work harder to prove myself. And I understand that I have privilege being a white passing Indigenous person who can hide, but that also comes with guilt that I hold inside and have held for many years, and understand that I need to share my story. And so that's why I do things like today I share my story, and why I'm trying to make it easier for future generations to really see themselves and find their voice. And so it's really important to be able to foster safe spaces, because you never know who's in the room. That's one thing. And then the other thing is the other self, that when I think about the concept of being unseen, and some of that mental health is, okay, I've decided that I want to be seen. And now the thing is, going back again one more time to the multi-dimensional identity, is I'm a woman. Did I get this opportunity? Did they ask me to speak because I'm Indigenous, or because I'm the right person for the opportunity? And then I found myself early in my career saying no to opportunities, because I was like, maybe they didn't have the right intentions. And then I self-excluded myself when I was missing out on opportunities, because I was scared about, what were they going to think? Were they going to ask me questions? Did they really think that I was good enough? And so all that psychological, and it really impacted my mental health early in my career. And I needed to really have really strong mentors and people around me to help work through some of that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And that also speaks to even the book Lean In that we all have, many of us have read, which talks about leaning into the opportunities. And I personally have felt that that challenge of being potentially tokenized and therefore turning down opportunities. So I hear what you're saying. A lot of individuals who are here today are on a path where they're looking towards their own personal journeys and allyship on towards truth and reconciliation. Are there any specific ideas or learnings that you might recommend that individuals take on if they're thinking about going on their own path?
I think that when I think about ideas, I think about that allyship happens within. It's not about grand action. It's about those small moments. And so, as I mentioned about over time, the pain, the paper cuts, those heal. And so the ally, it's not about recognition for you being an ally or for somebody being an ally. It's really about those small moments when I'm not in the room to help navigate some difficult situations. When you see something that isn't right, are you going to say something, or are you going to stay quiet? Are you going to I give this weightlifting analogy. When the weight is too heavy for me to bear, are you going to come and help me lift the weight? Or are you going to look at me and say, well, I didn't necessarily, you can just put down the weight? Or if I hurt myself, are you going to come and say, well, I told you to put it down? So it's all of these small moments. It doesn't need to be a company-wide initiative or something, a large spend. It can really be moments like this of listening to our stories. It can be a kind ear when somebody is struggling. I want to share that it's really about, and I know that this is going to sound a little cliche, but it's really about being comfortable being uncomfortable. And so the more uncomfortable you get as an ally and really dig in, that is alleviating the weight, and that means you're putting in the work. It's like as if I was trying to make a change to a piece of wood, that analogy about wood and sandpaper. You can make change. The biggest change is going to be painful with the grit of the coarse sandpaper. It's going to make the largest impact, but it's going to be rough and it's going to hurt potentially, but it's going to have a lasting impression and make significant impact. So it's that. It's and then two other things that I want to just mention really quickly as I think about allyship. It's about being intentional about understanding the land that you reside on, the simple understanding about the land and the impact, and understanding that words matter. So I made a reference about my name. There are lots of things that happen in the corporate world, things like lowest on the totem pole, or a reference to powwows as business meetings. And these seem simple to people who are already on their allyship journey. But when you notice somebody say that, it's a really quick course correction to say, hey, maybe we want to take a different approach, or maybe want to use a different word. It's all about those little moments and the accumulation of them.
Oh, yeah, I love what you said there. And I think that in regards to the allyship piece, I think a lot of individuals also, this is why sponsorship is so powerful now. It's another form of allyship where you're speaking for individuals who aren't in the room, but also knowing when to pass the mic so that they can speak for themselves. So
I could not agree more. And I think that just goes back to the first two questions about being seen and unseen. Both have unique benefits and challenges depending on where you are in your journey as an Indigenous person, as well as an ally. And being able to I made this reference in a previous speaking engagement, but it's about if you have a seat at the table, it really does not cost anything to pull up an extra chair to allow space. And maybe I don't want to speak at that moment, but knowing that I have a place if I want to just speaks volumes, and is when I'm ready, the platform is there for me to take advantage of.
Love that. Thank you very much, Starrlee. I really appreciate your time. And I have to share with everyone that I was on another panel with Starrlee previously. And after I heard her speak, I just thought, oh my gosh, we definitely have to get her here. So thank you so much for your generosity. I know it's been a busy week for you.
Thanks, Juliet. Can't wait.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to welcome our next speaker. I will let you know as well that there's a lot of nuggets there that Starrlee shared, and I know that you'd want to capture and to share with one another. So in an effort that you're not going to be furiously taking notes, I'll put up the Slido or the slide that will allow you to share and capture those nuggets from all of the speakers, and it'll be open throughout the session. So feel free to record them there, and we'll pull that up shortly. But I just want to welcome our next speaker, who is Oana Voinicu. And Oana has more than 20 years of experience in the automotive industry, currently having the position of the Senior Global Quality Director for Cosma International, which is a group of Magna International. Her educational background actually combines a PhD in engineering, wow, with a Bachelor of Science in sociology. And so she has been generous enough to share some of her time with us today. Oana, I welcome you to the stage.
Thank you so much, Juliet. After hearing Starrlee talking, I'm like, what am I doing here? What do I have to share with this extraordinary audience? So thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor, it's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. I'll let you go ahead and take the stage.
Okay, thank you so much. So when I received this invitation to participate, my very first thought was, why me? What do I have to share with such an amazing group of people? And when Juliet told me that it's more than 300 participants, it's like, oh my God. So it took me some time until I said yes and I accepted the invitation. Of course, I started to look over some information. I previously read the Lean In book, and it did shape my career. It shaped how I approach my path. I started to assess, do I have the proper qualification? Do I have the proper experience? Do I have the proper education to participate in such an event? It's typical, isn't it? Most of us been through situations like that. When I started to look back at my professional career, my personal life, I realized that for every job that I apply, for any position that I took, I always I wanted to make sure that I meet everything that it was on the job description, everything that was required from a job qualification. Every time I got a promotion, I thought, maybe I'm not well prepared. I do not have the proper experience and so many no's. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I don't know if you recognize yourselves in situations like that, but I'm here today. Again, I feel very grateful. So I'll talk a little bit about my background, and especially I had the privilege to have some extraordinary women in my life that helped me shape and become who I am. And probably I will start talking, and I'm not going into too much detail, but my grandma, who at the beginning of the 20th century, mid 20th century, she was a math teacher at a time when most women were staying at home and taking care of their families. She survived 2 world wars, lost everything in the second, survived different multiple political regime changes, but she always got up and continued her path. And I think that that's what she instilled in me. Even if I'm told no, it's okay. The next day, start all over again. What Starrlee said about those deep cuts that come, of course, I was not even far from the experience that she shared, but getting up and continue. And I think it's something that helped me so much. And I'm trying to convert and communicate with everybody, all the young professionals, young women that I come in contact to, resilience, right? Getting up every time when you have an issue. Then my mom, a chemistry teacher, had a big impact on me, on my education. At the time when there was not too much research, not too many conversation about ability to rethink, relearn, she instilled in me that mental flexibility, the humility and curiosity to be a perpetual student. And as a leader in the automotive world that is changing so much every day, where we're talking about electrical vehicles, where we're talking about autonomous driving, where we talk about car sharing, all these skills help me to get where I am, and hopefully will help me to continue in the path. I'm an immigrant. Come to Canada was an extraordinary experience, a thrilling experience. I feel blessed to have the chance to be here. I entered the automotive world in the early 2000s. And to be honest, at that time, there were not too many women, especially in engineering-related positions. And you could not see women in higher position than maybe mid-managers. Industry is changing. Is it changing with the speed that we would like? Not yet, but I'll talk a little bit about it. I'm fortunate enough to work for an organization that considers employees as key stakeholders in the business. A company that aims to attract, recruit, and retain talent with diverse background, perspective, and capabilities. If I look back, how we're trying to drive different diversity and inclusion initiatives and what we're doing as a full team, I'm sure that we are pretty behind other industries. The numbers speak. I don't have them in front of me, but as I said, you start to see more women in high positions. You start to see women from a director's level up, directors, seniors, directors, VPs, not to the amount that we would like. However, we created internally some employee resource community groups, which are based on volunteers from our organizations that support the commitment and vision of inclusion and diversity in our organization in multiple ways. I was one of the participants in such volunteers in such a group. We started also mentoring programs designed to encourage professional development, to foster also a sense of community between the participants. A program that encouraged the participants to challenge themselves, to share experience, to support each other. Personally, I think that I missed the opportunity when I was younger at the beginning of my career to take advantage of mentorship. I think that finding the right mentor can play an extraordinary role to empower women to speak up, to share their perspectives, and sometimes to even reframe what it means to be successful in a personal or professional life. As I said, I miss it, the opportunity when I was younger. I'm trying now to take advantage, but what I'm trying to do more is to act as a mentor for younger professionals, especially for women in science and in engineering. I'm trying to share my experience, my battles, the moments that I described a little bit earlier about when I doubt myself. And I'm trying to share with them how important it is to advocate for yourself. I used to sit at my desk, and when I was earlier in my career, do my work and always hoping that somebody will notice. But the reality is that it happens, but not necessary. And it happens if you have a special type of leaders, but let's be honest, it doesn't happen all the time. So that's what I'm trying to instill in my mentee as well. I feel personally responsible to create that work environment that everybody feels safe to express their opinion, where everybody feels safe to, where everybody feels respected, valued, when entire team has the opportunity to shine. And I think that, Juliet, you mentioned about the importance of sponsorship. And it's so true. It can help so much somebody in their careers to develop, to advance, if me as a leader, I talk about them in a positive way when they are present or when they are not present. From my experience, this can help tremendously somebody that is early in their career, even if it's later on. But it's one major topic that, again, I think I feel responsible for my team to do that. I also take very serious to work with other team members to identify the early leadership potential in some of the employees, in order for these candidates to obtain that feedback early in their career, so they don't get to advance in their careers when, like I did, right, late 40s or 50s, right? But if they had that opportunity to get new assignments, to get mentoring, coaching, which allows them to develop their network, and so that they can take more responsibilities and they can prove that they can do it. I strongly believe that giving women key experiences early in their career will help them to develop and go as far as their abilities and skills and motivations will take them. There are efforts in our organizations, there are efforts in our industry to attract talent, new talent from diverse backgrounds, retain and promote employees with different backgrounds, perspective, different capabilities. I'm not sure how much you know, Magna International is a tier 1 supplier, so we supply components. We do have also full vehicle assembly capacities, but we are supplying components to the big names like Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, Stellantis now, or the German OEMs. But some of these car manufacturers, they score their suppliers, and one of the criteria for that scoring is the initiatives related to diversity and inclusion. So there are, I think there is a little bit of traction in the industry, but as I said, when I started, when I started my career, there were very few women. There are very, very few women in leadership positions. We are a few more right now. I'm in Europe. Actually, I was at a conference. There were a lot of high up in the organization locally here. I was the only woman in that meeting. In North America is maybe a little bit different. Depends, but I think we're getting there. I think it's so important to get the pool of talent that start to work in the industry. We are doing a lot of activities with universities. Actually, in the last few weeks, I was on a few events organized by an extraordinary student organization, Women in Science and Engineering. They're doing a lot of events. They invite speakers to discuss with them different themes. My company, I have the privilege to work for a company that sponsors such events, and it's very interesting to hear these young students, graduates, what their concerns are. It's interesting to see sometimes yourself in these young professionals. And again, I'm at a certain age that I can do that, and I'm happy to go to these events. But to be honest, if I look back, I realize that my goal is to belong to the places where I work and not necessarily to fit in. I want to truly to stay true to my personal values and don't compromise them just because I want to fit in. I understand that psychologically, the human tendency is to gravitate around people like yourselves, which leads for powerful men to sponsor and advocate for other men when leadership opportunities arise. So I believe that women's leadership potential sometimes shows in less conventional ways, being responsive to organizational needs more than just boldly asserting a point of view. And sometimes it takes a really conscious effort to realize this. So I'm hoping that I realize that, and I'm putting that effort to help promote and to help advocate for the other women in the industry. So events like this are truly inspiration for me, and I cannot express more my gratitude for being invited to be part of it.
We can't express our gratitude enough for your being here. Thank you so much. I was writing furiously, and advocate for ourselves and identify early leadership, give key experiences early, staying true to our personal values. Just so many great takeaways there. Thank you so much, Oana.
Thank you.
I want to bring forward our next speaker, and I also want to encourage you to continue to capture your ahas, and we will share out on our website and our follow-up the aha moments as you're creating that cloud. So please continue to do so. Also, please feel free. You can see Keenan there is beautifully working away at a gorgeous piece of art. So that's available, as well as some silent auction donation items. Oh, I see Elijah. Hi, Elijah. Welcome. And in speaking of mentors and sponsors, I see some of my mentors and sponsors on the call right now, so I really appreciate that. But without further ado, Ayana Robertson has worked in banking for almost 15 years, which is hard to believe when you look at her. She is currently the Associate Vice President of HR, Diversity and Inclusion at TD. So TD is very lucky. They have some great people. Outside of work, she serves on the Human Resources and Strategic Planning Committees at COSTI, which is a community-based multicultural agency providing employment, educational, settlement, and social services to all immigrant communities, new Canadians, and individuals in need of assistance. And I'll just welcome you to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be part of this this discussion today. I too, you know, questioning why I'm here, but excited to really share my thoughts, and hopefully somebody gets something valuable from my presentation today. So, if you told 19-year-old me that I'd be here today representing the banking industry, I would have been immensely confused, because at that time, I would have told you I had no business in banking. In fact, I was on a completely different path, but I can assure you that I have learned that I do in fact have a place in banking. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background and what has brought me to this point. So I grew up in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is a tiny island nation in the Caribbean. It was a wonderful place to grow up, and I will tell you, I miss it every day, especially on snowy winter days. And back then, you really had to choose an academic path early in your educational journey. And so 14-year-old me somehow ended up in science classes, convinced the future in medicine was going to be my destiny. And mind you, no one forced me down this path, but the examples that I had seen had me convinced that the only logical options for someone with aptitude in math and science were engineering and medicine. And I'll age myself, so thank you for your kind words earlier, Juliet, but I will tell you that I was a big fan of the show ER, for those of you who remember, at the time. And so in my mind, decision made, right? Engineering, medicine, well, medicine, ER looks so cool. And so at 19, I left St. Vincent for Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, with every intent of becoming a doctor and moving back home to work. I decided to major in biochemistry because that made sense for someone planning to go to medical school, right? I was in my second year, and this is when I finally had to ask myself some really hard questions. Like, do you even like any of these classes? Honestly, the answer was no. My classmates seemed way more interested in what was going on than I was. And so eventually I had to admit to myself that I think I was more compelled by the idea of being a doctor than anything to do with practice of medicine itself. And so even though I completed my biochemistry degree, I decided in my second year that I wasn't going to pursue a career in sciences long term. And that really turned out to be a pivotal decision in my life. Because what happened was, not going through with a science honors degree actually gave me freedom to take electives outside of science. And in my final year, I took my first business classes ever. I think I took some HR classes and some finance classes, and I really enjoyed them. And this was when a clearer picture of a different future than the one I had initially imagined really started to take shape. but of course, nothing straightforward. And I was an international student at the time, and what that meant was when I graduated, I had to work in my field of study if my plan was to stay here in Canada. And I remember my dad sat me down after graduation because I was jobless and I had no real plan. And he asked me if I didn't just want to go back home with them, because what is your plan? To sit around and look pretty? You know, how are you paying bills? And so I told them, you know, I had 90 days to find a job. Let me take those 90 days and see what happens. It's been 19 years. I ended up finding a job in Calgary, Alberta, where I worked for 3 years as a lab tech. And eventually I was able to pursue endeavors outside of that original field of study. And this is when I really started to put the plan that I had seeded back in my second year of undergrad into motion. And so I moved to Toronto. I did my MBA at University of Toronto. And during this program, I had an opportunity to intern at one of the major banks in the HR department, and I really loved it. Now, I'll tell you, going into the MBA, I was sure I was going the finance route. And so again, I ended up surprising myself. The manager I interned with ended up hiring me full-time upon graduation. And as Juliet mentioned, I'm now going into my 15th year in HR, in the banking industry. The last year and a half at TD as a leader in the diversity, equity, and inclusion team. You know, so what I want to say at this point is, for anyone who may be uncertain about their current path, who might be itching for a change, don't be afraid to take a risk, to try something different, because you may surprise yourself, okay? As a leader in the DEI space within the banking industry, I can tell you the task is daunting, and it feels like it looms larger and larger every day. Yet I remain optimistic. Before taking on this role at TD, I spent over 3 years working in the DEI team within my previous organization, and I can say unequivocally that this is very rewarding work, but also emotionally taxing work. And as a Black woman, the implications of these efforts, the importance of succeeding in breaking down barriers, in removing longstanding inequities, they're deeply personal. And so when the opportunity to take on this leadership role presented itself, I honestly didn't know if I was up to the task. I wasn't sure if I was prepared to deal with the emotional heft of the responsibility. And if being honest, if I'm being honest, I'm a classic introvert, and I wasn't keen on the profile that is often necessary in roles like this. I tend to like to sit safely in the background. You would honestly never find me volunteering for a speaking engagement like this one in the past, but ultimately I decided, why not me? Even though public speaking and being in the spotlight is not what I gravitate towards, it quickly became clear to me how powerful visibility is. In the time that I've been in this role, I've done a few panels and speaking engagements, and after each event, without fail, someone approaches me or reaches out via email to say how meaningful it was for them to see a person who looked like them, someone who spoke with a foreign accent, someone who wore their hair in braids or twists or whatever hairdo I had going on that day. It changes weekly sometimes, in a position of leadership. And, you know, while I've certainly had challenges throughout my careers, times where I've questioned whether I was good enough, where I've lost confidence, where I've been subject to microaggressions, I can say during the time that I've worked in banking, I've never felt like I had to suppress the parts of myself that I felt truly made me me. And this is a privilege that I know not everyone holds. And so I push past this discomfort because my presence and my willingness to speak up is playing at least a small part in encouraging others. And, this is what I can do from my place of privilege as a leader. And I'm fortunate to work in an organization that creates space where I can truly be myself. I like to say that the person that I am at work is someone those who know me best in my private life would easily recognize. And this is very important to me. And so I really try to make space for others to do the same, to be able to feel like they can be the person they are at home, at work as well. I want to say a little bit more about banking and my organization in particular. I have to say I've been really impressed by the commitment at TD, but more broadly across the banking industry as well to DEI. And this is part of the reason I felt comfortable about my decision to step into this role. At a time when it could be very easy to pull back. We know what's going on out there. We see it happening every day. In some cases, entire DEI departments are being shut down. We are holding firm and taking action to advance our commitments. There's a well-worn phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats. And the DEI leaders across the banking industry are really making time to get together, to share our challenges, to share our learnings, because collective effort is really going to be required here, particularly in the current environment. Now, for DEI efforts to be successful, everyone really has a role to play. I don't think this is a surprise. The reality is everyone isn't starting from the same place. The playing field is not even. Any organization that is serious about advancing DEI needs to take deliberate action to ensure that we're creating an inclusive and an equitable environment where everyone has fair opportunity to achieve their version of success. We still have a long way to go, but I wanted to highlight some of the practices that we're implementing at my current organization. So we're strengthening some of our accountability mechanisms and increasing our transparency. As an example, TD recently released a racial equity assessment to the public that is an independent review of our practices as it pertains to DEI. And most of the other Canadian banks are planning to do the same or something similar in the near future. We've been focusing a lot on learning for everybody, on things like unconscious bias and microaggressions, allyship, and education on the history and experiences of many of our historically marginalized and underrepresented groups. We think understanding is so critical to really be able to make change. From a system standpoint, from a process standpoint, DEI is a key partner on some of our key talent programs, initiatives from the inception of the work to ensure that it's not just a consideration at the end, but something that is factored in throughout the development process so that it is embedded and integrated, not just tacked on. And then someone else mentioned employee resource groups. This is something else that we support as well. Opportunities to build engagement as a community for our colleagues to make their voices heard, for them to share feedback and provide insight that informs strategic direction of many of our programs and practices. Seeing these commitments come to life through real action encourages me personally to keep going when things get tough. When we look around and see legislation being enacted that is setting us back. But like I said, I'm optimistic. We've been here before, and I feel like we'll be able to survive this period as well. So just to wrap it up, initially, when I thought I had no business in banking, I didn't fully understand that in banking, there was an opportunity to make an impact in a way that was meaningful to me. I didn't understand that my empathetic nature that really drew me to the idea of becoming a doctor could translate so seamlessly into advocating for inclusion and equity in financial services. It's really important to bring the lessons that you learn along the journey with you and not count yourself out. You have to be your best advocate as well. and you probably have a lot more to offer than you think. And so for those of you who are not sure whether there's a place for you to channel your passion for this work or any other type of work within the banking industry, I can assure you that that there is. So I'll just end it there and I guess turn it back to Juliet.
Wow, thank you. And you know, so many there, but the why not me? That's just so beautiful. Thank you very much for that. So I'm going to welcome our next speaker to the stage, who happens to be someone who's familiar to many of us at Lean In Canada. That's because she is the president of one of our networks. Reena specializes in developing and implementing human resource strategies that are unique. And she's actually been contributing to Forbes magazine as a member leader of the Forbes Council, as well as a member of the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council. So I'll welcome Reena to the stage.
Thank you, Juliet. It's an honor to be here today. I've so far I'm really enjoying the stories and just the vulnerability, I think, and the confidence that all of our panelists are bringing forward today. And for Lean in Canada to be able to implement such an important webinar for International Women's Month is so impactful. I think for so many of us that don't always have the opportunity to share how impactful it is. So thank you, Lean in Canada. Thank you, team across Canada who's with us today, and especially the panelists. My journey through entrepreneurship, the lens that I can share today for DEI and B, you know, we talk about belonging and how belonging integrates diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's very similar to Oana. It starts, you know, as a child, as you know, I was born and raised in Edmonton. I am Canadian born and raised, and I spent my childhood with my maternal grandmother. And the beauty of looking back now, you know, when I look back now 40 years ago when I was, you know, 5 years old and my grandmother didn't know English, she was, you know, from India, and she spent a lot of her time in Canada helping raise. And it wasn't uncommon for families that immigrated to Canada in the 1970s to look for help from their parents. And it was, you know, again, not very uncommon for children to be raised by their grandparents in our culture. So I used to, and I have this memory, and I used to see my grandmother, who was very, very young, a very young widow. And so she was the matriarch of our entire family of 6 children, and now, you know, 20 grandchildren and, you know, 17 great-grandchildren up until her passing. But I used to watch her make our staple food in Punjab. We eat roti, and she used to make this roti perfectly with her rolling pin, and she would roll it, and she would teach me. She would say, you know, you need to make this when you're older. Your role is going to be significant in the kitchen, and you need to be able to make this roti perfectly for your family. And I really owned that as a 5-year-old from kindergarten who would come home and be ready to make that roti with my grandmother, and I would watch her, how perfectly her circle was. And so that part of the story is so significant because, of course, we didn't have a, lazy Susan back then to aid us in making the perfect circle. I was more focused, in hindsight, as a child, I was more focused on making that circumference perfect. I was focused on the perfect circle and not on the taste. I wasn't so concerned about who I was serving the roti to or how the outcome of that would be for people that I love and in my family. I was more focused on, can I do this in the perfect way I'm supposed to? And how that navigated, and it's interesting, I'll come back to that, but how that navigated my life was I became focused on goal setting. And, I'd like to do this. Can I do this? How far out can you make a goal to be able to want to achieve it? And so, I decided to, fast forward a few years, I decided to finish high school early. Thought, well, why not? Maybe I can do high school in 2 years, 2.5 years, and I can fly off to the UK and do some international work experience. There were so many, I think, for, women of different cultures, of course, but there's so many different already predetermined decisions for a woman's life, and depends on culture. And I saw that with my grandmother, who had taught me, this is what you need to do, because this is what she did, and this is what my mom was doing. And with my grandmother, though, there was such an entrepreneurial spirit in her that was able to tackle anything she put her mind to. So in essence, she was her own entrepreneur. And so I did finish high school early. I did move out to the UK. I did all of these great things that I wanted to progress. And I found that entrepreneurship is definitely something I'd like to do. Maybe one day I can own my own business. Maybe one day I'll go and open up an international company. I had all these beautiful, beautiful dreams. And it took time. I can say is that, honoring the culture is very important for women. What I've heard so far on the panel today is we have addressed a lot of imposter syndrome. We've heard it from our panelists. We likely will hear it from our audience at Q&A is, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I can do this. And imposter syndrome is so potent and it resonates. And without a community of women and friends and a circle, like Lean In suggests, it's hard to actually get out of that mindset that I don't think I can do this. So over the course of 20 years, and I'm just hitting 25 years of corporate experience now, over that course, I always gravitated to mentors, allies, male allies particularly, so that I could have a different objective view of, I think, culture, different cultures, Canadian cultures and workplace cultures. So when I launched my organization in 2020, I just wanted to consult. I thought, finally, it's taken me almost 20 years to get here, but I'm going to launch my own business and integrate all of my learnings, all of my childhood and what I've learned about myself and the mentorship and what I still need to learn. And it's interesting because I gave up my Lazy Susan. Up until this point, I had this wonderful Lazy Susan that was helping me make rotis for my family. And what I realized was over time, despite the aid of the Lazy Susan, my rotis were becoming triangular, maybe an octagon, maybe a hexagon one day. I was lacking heart and soul. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do. I was making it for the purpose of feeding people that I loved, but I wasn't doing it for purpose because that was my passion. Where for my grandmother, that was her passion. She loved that. It was heart and soul for her. For me, it wasn't my passion. There were so many things that I wasn't doing that was following my passion. So my son took over. He can actually just run circles around me in the kitchen. He's got a gifted palate. It was empowering for him to be able to want to be on MasterChef one day and maybe a Gordon Ramsay, and for me to encourage that role for him in what, again, being born and raised in a very traditional family. And my daughter would say to me along the way, of course, Mom, you have so much potential. And of course, she's my daughter. She's going to say that, but it was different. It was a very objective sight that she saw was, Mom, you have so much potential. You need to do something that's going to be able to fulfill your heart and soul, or you'll never do it. So I think that my children were huge catalysts for me to be able to pursue entrepreneurship, launch my organization in a very humble way, maybe Canadian. I thought, okay, maybe I'll do a North American consulting virtually. It's COVID. This is perfect. I did not realize maybe the potential that I had. I didn't realize that relationships and my ability to communicate and develop those relationships and honor them would be so important and likely the foundation for creating a business that I was able to launch, I was able to execute and grow over 20 individuals on storytelling, 10 countries, 6 continents in just under 1 year. And so what I learned about myself in that portion, and I still learn this every single day, is we are so hard on ourselves because of what we weren't able to do, or because of what we failed at in the past. But what we don't see is that every single failure and every single loss along the way is actually making us stronger. It's actually building us to be able to overcome the imposter syndrome that we've heard on the panel today. It helps us actually develop those skills and likely some of those gifts and talents that we have that we never possibly could have done if we didn't just take the leap. Just take the leap. So when I look at my company today, and I'm so, again, I sit with a lot of humility. I sit with a lot of pride as well to know that I was able to overcome fear. I was able to let go of what wasn't working. I was able to listen to the people that mattered most to me, my children, and take their advice at a young age. And also, you know, like Sheryl Sandberg's book, honor while we're sitting on the shoulders of our ancestors and the women that didn't have the voice that we have in today's society, to be able to honor our ancestors and the women that have paved the path for us. And then also honor those such as like my daughter in Generation Z, who's also paving the path in her own way with the tools that probably make it a little bit easier for that generation. But that generation's also helping us. They're going back and saying, hey, you know what? We see your struggles. We see what you didn't have. So how about this? I think you can do it in this way. So there's a learned guidance from multi-generational opportunities for all of us. And so not only entrepreneurship, but I think in a leadership position, I know when I decided to embark on this beautiful journey with Lean In, I wasn't really sure if I could do it. Again, I'm with the panel. I just didn't know, could I be the president of Lead in Calgary? Calgary has been home to me for 23 years, and it has been the sole professional opportunity for me. I just didn't know if I could do it. And I thought, you know, I don't want to sit and look back and think, what if? That's like the biggest thing to sit in is regret and feel like, oh, I could have, would have, should have, why didn't I? I didn't want to do that. And so I thought Calgary came up as a Lean In present opportunity. I have a team that is looking forward to working with me. And there's a team also that may be looking for my mentorship. And the more open and vulnerable I can be in sharing my stories, including my obstacles, including what hasn't worked, probably there's an opportunity for all of them to be able to gain not only through the Lean In Canada Calgary network, but also in their own professional opportunities. This idea of glass ceiling, there is no glass ceiling. I don't know where it was created. I don't know where this analogy was brought into fruition, but quite honestly, let's not look at the glass ceiling or the corporate ladder. Perhaps what we need to do is look at us as a lattice, as, you know, this maze where it's not vertical, but it's actually horizontal. There's no hierarchy. There are many, many paths for all of us to be able to explore in a lattice analogy versus a glass ceiling analogy, because quite honestly, we're already there. We rode the tails of our ancestors. We are already there. So if we can make an impact again as entrepreneurs and as Lean In networks across Canada, that's what we're here to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You know, it's funny when you spoke about the lazy Susan. In my house, I don't allow us to call it lazy Susan. We call it lazy Sam.
Fair enough. I knew I would get a little bit of heat for that, you know, termed device that we used today. So thank you. I'll call it
But
a
you know,
lazy Sam.
that being said, I mean, just take the leap. And there is no glass ceiling. I will definitely take that with me. So thank you so much. We're going to head off into our break, and the QR code that's on the screen is a QR code that will take you to the fundraiser. I don't know, Keenan, are you, can you hear me? Are you there? You're on mute.
Silly me.
I just noticed, and if anyone wants to go on break, feel free to go on break. We would suggest, however, that you don't pop out. Just check your camera off and then come back for 7:25 exactly. We'll have our next speaker on deck. But I wanted to ask Keenan, I noticed in the painting that you're doing that there's a lot of print behind on the canvas. Can you just explain that a little bit?
For sure. So I do have to admit that I didn't start today's canvas with a clear, with just from a blank canvas as I usually do, because I think that with this specific event, being lean in and being based on the book with Sheryl Sandberg, I really wanted to have that reflect in the piece. So the background are actually snippets from the book and some of my favorite quotes from the book as well. And I have glued them on as the background so you can kind of see them come through the paint as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And the QR code is there. We have 50 digital copies, and then we have one of the actual painting that will be shipped out, and that's available for silent auction as well. So we will see you back here at 7:25, folks. Thank you. Thanks, Keenan.
Thanks, Juliet.
Welcome our next speaker. It's 7:25. It's Laura Boyko. So Laura is a registered social worker, psychotherapist, leadership coach, and a certified equine learning facilitator who considers herself an example of being part of the leaky pipeline can actually lead to great things. She has over 25 years of leadership experience in healthcare, mental health, and post-secondary education, and is excited to share with you all today her insights and lessons that she's learned along her journey. So welcome, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. I'm going to just share my slides with you. And as somebody tonight has said, just try things. So that's what I'm doing tonight. Okay, here I am in my slideshow. All right. Hi, good evening. I'm Laura Boyko, and I'm honored to have been invited here tonight alongside such an exceptional group of women. I'm excited to share with you all a few of my experiences and lessons learned while working in healthcare the last 25 years. For 15 years, I held leadership roles climbing the corporate ladder until 4 years ago, I pivoted. I chose the unintended path of entrepreneurship. I've primarily worked in mental health and currently run my own private practice, Be Well Therapy. And as Juliet mentioned, in addition, I also own an equine assisted learning business called Stableworks. Like our previous presenters who had said, they wanted to become a doctor, they wanted to do something else and ended up in their current profession. I too wanted to be a veterinarian, went into animal science at Guelph University, and I am now a social worker. So you can see how that worked out. I want to talk to you tonight about three things. I want to talk about women in leadership, the equity challenges of women in leadership, and its impact on your mental health. I'll share a bit about my own leadership journey, some stats that paint a picture of that for us, and how leadership impacts our mental health and how we can take action. Sound good? Okay, let's go. Okay, so leadership can be a lonely place. I know many of you have experienced this. If you've ever been in a leadership role like I have, you'll know this to be true. Who here has often felt like you were standing in a field all alone? Maybe just put a yes in the chat or a me. And as a leader, you can often feel alone because you're the only one having to make those big decisions, or you've been tasked with a large project with a large budget. Sometimes the issues you feel Sometimes the issues can feel like you're the only one who sees them. Like, is no one else not noticing the elephant in the room? Perhaps you're not in a formal leadership role, or you're an emerging leader, just new to leadership, or in an informal leadership role. Maybe you're an entrepreneur, or you're leading yourself. This can be a lonely place, often having to make decisions about your business and future with only you to consult. Both of these places can be lonely, and we often seek out a place, group, or even sense of belonging. Our sense of belonging is intrinsic to our mental well-being, as it's more than simply being acquainted with other people. It's centered on acceptance, connection, validation, and support from others. As a leader for over 15 years in community mental health, hospital, and university healthcare services, I've been there. And just like standing in a field alone, we can often live in a state of nervousness and threats from our environment. Fear is an emotion that can drive behavior and actions, but in leadership, we're required to remain consistent, rational, and collaborative. We might find ourselves operating in a place where we fear failure or experience imposter syndrome, as previous presenters have mentioned. Who here has ever wondered if they could trust their coworker? Who here has ever wondered if their position was in jeopardy if funding was cut or leadership above them changed? Who here has ever been afraid to make that decision, afraid to take on that new promotion, afraid to step in a space that maybe you didn't feel competent or confident? Fear is what I call false evidence appearing real. I'll say that again. False evidence appearing real, fear. And if our nervous system is always on, it can lead to excessive stress, fatigue, and burnout. I've had times of fear of letting go of control. And as an entrepreneur, I've definitely had more moments of fear of growing in my business, fear of failure. But I've learned that it's in those moments of fear and going scared is where I grow and learn the most, and learn to overcome any obstacle that might be in my way. Since I left my formal leadership roles, I found my leadership skills invaluable as an entrepreneur. I've also reflected as to how I lead myself. As a leader of over 12 teams and hundreds of staff, I learned that the best way to lead was to be clear in my communication, be authentic, be genuine, and be fair. And as an equine learning facilitator, I've learned from horses to live in the present moment. Last summer, when I was taking some riding lessons, I was struggling to keep my horse trotting. He kept slowing down, and my riding coach kept saying, "Laura, you have to keep your hands loose and give him a squeeze. Let him know what you want him to do." I was so nervous about not holding on tight that I couldn't communicate properly to my horse. And once I trusted him enough to let go enough, he kept trotting. And the feeling of letting go, of needing to control everything, brought me to literal tears in that moment. Me riding a horse in a field with tears streaming down my face. And it was in this moment that I learned that by giving up some control, I also gain a sense of freedom and ease. And this is how horses teach us. As someone who has worked in healthcare for many years, I've often seen the inequities around me. I've paid attention to who held the senior roles, who got promoted, and who took a seat at the table. I've worked in many areas of the hospital, medicine, emerge, rehab, mental health, and I saw how hard people worked, including leadership. But I also saw the challenges that leaders faced, forced to hang on tight to decision-making, afraid to let go of control, and unable to ease up on the reins of leadership. Leaders today are tasked with managing many, many issues on a daily basis. And with all these challenges, let's take a look at what's happening for women in leadership and dive into some of the stats. Women have been underrepresented in leadership historically, but we have made some strides since 2015, increasing from 17 to 28%. However, women of color continue to lag behind their peers and are severely underrepresented in leadership positions, mostly C-suite. There is a slower growth for leaders in the manager-director level at only 3 to 4%. Women represent 1 in 4 leaders in C-suite, but women of color just 1 in 16. Women under 30 are an ambitious group, but that's for sure, as 9 in 10 want to be promoted. This leads us to the broken rung. It's not a glass ceiling that necessarily keeps women from rising in their career. It's the broken rung that creates the biggest obstacles. For every 100 men that are promoted, only 87 women were promoted, 73 for women of color. And as a result, women fall behind and can't catch up. On top of these stats lies additional challenges of microaggressions in the workplace, and this creates a psychologically unsafe environment, which causes women to shield up, adjust the way they look or act in an effort to self-protect. Many think about quietly quitting altogether and end up burnt out. That's me. I'm an example of the leaky pipeline, someone who was on the C-suite trajectory after many years of exemplary leadership and a 5 out of 5 performance review. I left leadership. Do I regret it? Nope. Do I miss it? Sometimes. Medicine's a very gendered profession with only 70% female representation in medicine. However, only 25% of women are in leadership positions, and actually only 5 in senior leadership positions. Additional covert forms of gender discrimination remain. A 2020 study discussed mid-career women in emergency medicine who are 7 times more likely than men to leave due to a lack of autonomy at work, control over working conditions, fair compensation, and a lack of sense of ownership. In academia, enrollment of women has increased to parity, sometimes above men at the undergraduate level, but reduces at the postgrad rate, and disparities remain in academic rank, career advancement, and leadership positions as women faculty continue to lag behind their male colleagues. Inequities exist, such as organizational culture, that are not committed to DEI, unconscious bias and stereotyping, HR practices that marginalize the hiring of women, employment conditions that do not provide for the needs of women, pay inequity, and workplace harassment. Research is showing us that female physicians and surgeons actually have better outcomes. Businesses have higher revenues with women at the top, and female leaders of countries fared much better during the COVID-19 response. The World Health Organization concluded women as the majority of the global health and social care workforce are the drivers of global health. It's time to change the narrative. It's time we move beyond women's nominal representation and actively seek women's advancement into positions at the head of the table. And yet, during the pandemic in 2021, 38% of women in leadership considered quitting their jobs, and 8% did. Since returning to my roots of psychotherapy, I've been happy to see that so many therapists from so many walks of life are out there. One look on Instagram and you'll see therapists, both male and female, people of color, 2S LGBTQI+, Indigenous, younger, older, those who are reaching out to provide care and treatment and support to those in need. And while we're doing well, we still have work to do. We need to increase our representation of racialized therapists, as having a therapist with a similar cultural background can positively impact therapy outcomes and are more likely to stay in therapy with a good experience. The demand for therapists is expected to climb past 20% by 2030 as the stigma around mental health declines. More and more therapists are receiving training on the diverse needs of our clients, and about 25% to work specifically with the LGBTQ+ clients, and 27% having received training in multicultural counseling. But we could be doing more in this area as the diversity in the GTA and across Canada continues to deepen. So what can we do? We can't simply throw our hands up and give up, right? And this is a complicated and complex issue to challenge and change. But there's some key factors that I found in the literature and from my own experience as a leader that could help develop, recruit, and retain women in leadership. We need to compensate women fairly and equitably for their work. A Canadian study found that women earn 84 cents for every dollar earned by men. Overall, that's a 16% pay differential between men and women when all factors like education and experience are taken into consideration. It's even wider for women of color, and that's equal to about $500,000 across a lifetime. And this continues to be unexplained in the literature. Women feel empowered when mentored. Oana spoke about mentorship, and I'm so glad to hear that she is driving that from her position, because creating leadership development programs for women within an organization provides a place for women to develop their network and mentorship relationships. Additional supports for BIPOC leaders are key to ensuring a diverse leadership group. Women tend to have better and quicker ascension when mentored from within the organization. Work flexibility allows women to remain in the workplace with things such as work from home, flexible work hours, limited travel, childcare subsidy, and even unlimited vacation, which can be key factors in recruitment and retention. Organizations need to realize their female leaders are willing to leave and move to another organization. Women have more options than ever, and many are leaving leadership where they can regain the flexibility in return for their mental health and family responsibilities. I'd like to leave you with one of my most favorite stories of leadership. I once took my team out for the afternoon for a team building session, and we decided to learn to dragon boat. Our instructor divvied us up for the boat, and we all climbed in. Our team was made up of various ages, backgrounds, athletic abilities, and professions. As we eagerly glided out onto the water, paddling ever so slightly, our instructor told us to raise our paddles up and then together put them in the water and row. We quickly got in sync and we're rowing together and moving quickly across the top of the water. Some of us got excited and started to row at a quicker pace than others. And before we knew it, the boat started to rock, and we all felt it with a nervous energy. We all started to say, "The boat is rocking." And our instructor yelled to us, "Paddles up." And we took our paddles out of the water, and the boat quickly stopped rocking. We needed to just stop, regroup, let the boat and our team settle before we could continue. I would encourage everyone here who's either leading a team or not, that when your boat is rocking, just lean into what you feel and listen. Connect with a mentor, trust your gut, and keep paddling. Thank you so much for having me tonight. I appreciate your time and attention. I'd love to connect further with you to discuss women in leadership or mental health. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And one of the pieces that you mentioned about mentorship is really interesting, because in this remote and hybrid world, finding mentors, sponsors is becoming increasingly more difficult, especially for individuals who hold multiple identities in underrepresented groups. So your ask for more representation in the world of therapy is a really strong one. So thank you very much. And lots of great stuff there. I'm definitely going to be taking the stop rowing when your boat is rocking and lean in. Thank you. Our next speaker is Cicely Blaine, and I'll also, before I welcome her to the stage and introduce her, I'll just remind us that the cloud is still open, and that Keenan, you can see, is busily working away on our piece of art, and so you can go to the Givergy site and check that out, as well as there's a couple of other items there that you might secure, as well as some donation opportunities. Cicely is a Black mixed heritage queer activist, writer, and entrepreneur from London, UK, and now based in Vancouver. They are the CEO of Boyko Consulting, the editorial director of Ripple of Change magazine, and the author of Burning Sugar. Cicely Bell was a founding organizer, of Black Lives Matter Vancouver. They also instruct executive leadership at Simon Fraser University and serve on the board of the Tegan and Sarah Foundation. Very lucky to have you. Welcome, Cicely.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and really appreciate the invitation to get involved. I'm going to share my screen as well, or I'm going to attempt to. Let's see. So much I could say, and really appreciate the invitation. My work is really centered in anti-oppression, equity, inclusion, social justice, and all of these things. And that's kind of the foundation of kind of what I want to share with you today. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background and kind of what brings me to this work. I was born and raised in the UK, in London, and this is where a lot of my story started. A lot of people ask me when I came into kind of like doing equity and inclusion work, activism with BLM, what were some of those roots of my inspiration? And I was really lucky to be raised in a family of, strong feminist women who really encouraged me to follow my dreams and particularly to invest back into community where possible. I grew up in an area of Southeast London, called Thamesmead. I doubt anybody will have heard of it. It's not the glamorous part of London that people are often familiar with, but I think about it often. It's, one of my homes. And I also think about it because when I first got involved with BLM, I had the incredible opportunity to meet some of the organizers from BLM in the US, and they came to Vancouver to speak to us about their experiences, and that was incredible to be able to work with some of the kind of OG organizers in Black Lives Matter. And one of the questions they asked us at the beginning was, what is your earliest memory of systemic oppression? And I was like, okay, chill, that's a very casual question. But it was really powerful to kind of see, I think, specifically the difference between discrimination and oppression. A lot of people can remember, being bullied or being excluded or isolated or, put down because of something about them. But I think being asked to really reflect on when we really understood that something like racism or sexism or homophobia was a manifestation of power and systemic oppression, that really shifted, I think, my understanding of this work and my kind of connection to this work more broadly. So in answer to that question, I said, I remember being on the bus, going home from school one day. I went to school in a predominantly white middle-class neighborhood, but where I lived was a predominantly working class, Black and brown neighborhood. And I hadn't really thought much of it as a kid. It's not really something that you necessarily ask questions about. But I remember one specific occasion where we were getting on the bus, we're teenagers, everybody's pushing and shoving, and an older white woman was kind of shoved in the process, and she kind of turned around and she shouted at the group of us, and she said, "Go home," and she used the N-word towards us. And even though that was just one moment, one person, I think I kind of had this, I don't know, almost out of body experience where I kind of looked around at, the other folks on the bus, and I thought, how come this one bus takes all the Black and brown kids to the part of town which has fewer resources, has less funding, the schools aren't as good, which is why all of our parents tried to get to us into this school in the white neighborhood. Things are more run down, there's higher rates of crime, people are struggling, and it's very obvious and it's very visceral. We pretty much all see ourselves as British, and this person says, "Go home." She thinks we don't belong. We are not part of that world. We're not part of her world. And at first I was like, well, we are going home. That's why we're on the bus. But then I really understood how all of these things were so intrinsically connected, the kind of privilege and entitlement and expectation that she had based on, her surroundings, being surrounded by a lot of people who look like her in a country where a lot of people look like her and the people in positions of power look like her too. And in that, that's when I really kind of understood the big picture of systemic oppression and how that it's so much more than just an interpersonal experience of bias and discrimination. So I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to move to Vancouver when I was 18 to come to the University of British Columbia. And I was so fortunate for this experience to get a scholarship to come here to Vancouver and go to UBC. And I still thought a lot about that moment and many other moments. And I had this kind of sense of intrinsic rage and anger inside me. And especially as a teenager, you just don't know where to put that, right? You don't know where to put all of the anger and frustration that you feel about the world, that you feel about the systems. Everything seems so big. And especially, in your adolescence, it really does feel like the world is against you. And I think when you have those added layers of marginalization, you can say that the world is indeed against you, is against you persevering, is against you achieving the same levels of success as maybe some of your peers from different backgrounds. And so in some ways, those feelings are very real, but there isn't often an outlet, and there isn't really the knowledge or capacity to be able to address those feelings and those pieces. So in coming to UBC, I then kind of learned more about the academic approach to a lot of these concepts. I learned about intersectionality and Kimberly Crenshaw and feminist theory, and took a lot of classes that gave me the language to be able to describe my experiences. But I think at the same time, that still didn't feel very tangible. I still didn't feel like I could put those into practice in a certain way. I remember I absolutely was convinced when I came that I was going to major in political science. I was like, I love politics. That really fascinates me. And I took Political Science 100, and it was the most boring class in existence. All about, Machiavelli and, all of that theory. And I was like, how on earth is that going to contribute to systemic change, just to read these books? And while it's fascinating and important to know these things, again, I was feeling this sense of frustration and disillusionment with not being able to enact on that change, especially having, grown up in a family of activists. Like this picture here is when my grandma took me. She would take me to a lot of protests. One of my earliest memories is sitting on her shoulders at a protest. It wasn't even anything major. I think we were protesting because they wanted to turn the local firehouse into apartments, but I didn't know the language then, but it was basically gentrification. And that was what kind of the beginning of the end for my neighborhood in a lot of ways. And now when I go back, I don't recognize it at all. It's been gentrified to the point of, where a lot of the families that I grew up around can no longer afford to live there. And so I was, again, finding myself in this confused place of, okay, I know the feeling and I know the language, but I don't know how to move. I don't know how to act in a way that creates significant social change. So then after I graduated from UBC, I was fortunate to have the opportunity to be one of the founding members of Black Lives Matter Vancouver. And this is kind of where I finally felt that outlet to make significant change by practicing direct action. And being a frontline activist is incredibly challenging, brings up a lot of experiences, which I don't think I was psychologically or emotionally ready for in a lot of ways. Just after the murder of Andrew Loku in Toronto in 2016, I believe, a few members of the BLM Toronto movement reached out to some of us in Vancouver and said, okay, we want to make this a national movement. We want Canada to understand BLM is not just an American issue. Racism is not just an American issue. Can we get people across, what is known as Canada to participate in our own version of Black Lives Matter? And that's kind of how BLM Vancouver really came about. So within that scope of activism, I then felt like I had all of the tools that were necessary to be a change maker. And I felt really equipped with a lot of the elements of activism, both the passion and drive for it, the knowledge and theory behind it, and then the skills and tools that allow you to show up, on the streets in a way that makes makes waves and draws attention. So I was with BLM Vancouver for about 3 years, and I also began to recognize how it can be unsustainable to always be participating in direct action in that way. It can be very dangerous, and particularly at the time, I didn't become a Canadian citizen until last year, I believe. So it was a very precarious position to be so publicly involved in certain actions, and so many other reasons why it's not always possible for people to like put their bodies out there in such a way. Like, I remember one of our actions was we lay in the middle of the street to draw attention to police brutality and the high rates of murder of Black trans people across North America. And I remember before we did that, we had to write the number of our lawyer on our bodies in case we didn't have access to our phones. So there's a lot of ways that can lead to pretty extreme burnout. And for me, it wasn't sustainable to continue in that way. And I did feel a lot of guilt and shame from exiting the movement, or not necessarily exiting, but maybe taking a step back, taking a back seat. But there were so many other factors as well, recognizing that there's, I think, particularly a way that our society creates celebrities out of activists. And I think it was very easy for the media to create a celebrity out of me, particularly as like a lighter skinned person, whereas some of my darker skinned colleagues, for example, were not celebrated in the same way. So lots of reasons why it was important for me to kind of shift gears a little bit. So that's what led me to a lot of the work that I do now. I was working at a nonprofit at the time, and I remember there was some specific kind of like contentious moments, particularly because one of our biggest kind of campaigns in 2016, 2017 was the removal of police from the Vancouver Pride Parade. And this is something that kind of, was created a lot of controversy and discussion around the city. Some people were for, some people were against, some people were just haters for no reason. In fact, a lot of people were haters for no reason, and some people were just completely apathetic to the idea. But I was working at a nonprofit whose focus was supporting and improving the lives of 2S LGBTQ+ people across British Columbia and the Yukon. And I felt myself kind of stuck in this strange place where a lot of queer-led organizations were being asked to stand in solidarity with BLM and to say, we support these Black, queer, and trans folks who are asking for safety, who are asking for inclusion, who are asking for access, not just on behalf of the Black community, but on behalf of Indigenous folks, immigrant and refugee folks who have experienced police violence in various ways, and also queer folks more broadly, right? It's when we think about the impact that policing has had on the queer community over the past forever, it's significant regardless of skin color. And for example, the last bathhouse raid in Canada was in 2001. So not really that long ago that policing was still very direct and active, impacting the queer community. So this strange tension of working for this nonprofit, wanting to better the lives of queer folks across the province, and also being part of BLM, and the division that was being intentionally created within the community, and kind of realizing that excuse me, to drink some water. Kind of realizing that, especially, in Vancouver, the Black population is quite small. We're not necessarily going to have those same numbers to stand up against larger groups or larger powers. And so I think that's what really drove me to want to start my own work, to be able to create something intersectional where I don't have to sacrifice the part of me that is pro-Black, the part of me that supports, recognizing police violence, the part of me that is what may be perceived in some professional spaces as more radical. But I also don't want to sacrifice my professional endeavors and my desire to still further the liberation of other lived experiences that I'm part of. So that's really where Bakau came around. It's named after a place in the Gambia, which is where my maternal family is from. And it's, we're a social justice focused consulting company, and anti-racism and intersectionality are like a core element for us. And I think it's been really cool to be able to use all of those experiences to transfer knowledge in a way that's accessible to lots of different people who maybe would have, steered away from something like BLM, thinking maybe it's too radical, and they might have heard particular stereotypes about how activism works or operates. But I think what I've been able to show with Bakau is that it is possible to bridge those gaps between the streets and the boardrooms, between the theory and the direct action and the professional world as well. So that's kind of my story, and how I think it's so important to bring in those various different elements of staying true to certain values, but being able to shift them based on the audience or based on the space. And I think every element of change making is crucial and is urgent. We can't necessarily always be the kind of people who show up on the streets, and we might not be the kind of people who have access to people in leadership positions. But I think together, if we're all operating in ways that are most accessible to us, then I think that's how we can make a difference. And I think those things can shift and change throughout our lives. And I think, as I mentioned, my grandma was extremely influential to me, and she was someone who I think was really able to do that throughout her life. In the 1970s, she was arrested at Greenham Common in the UK for protesting against nuclear weapons. And then later in life, in her 90s, she wasn't able to do that, but she still, donated monthly to all of her favorite causes, or she would write letters in support or solidarity for Cuba or Palestine or whatever it was she believed in. So I think at different points in our life, we can take those different roles as long as we're being consistent with our values and supporting each aspect of a movement when we're able to. So that is me, and I really appreciate having the space to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, there's so much there. I did want to say, first of all, I realized in the forum of allyship, I had a couple of our Lean In members reach out to me, and I feel like I should apologize because I did, I think, use the pronoun she prior to you approaching the stage. So out of respect for your preferred pronoun of they, I wanted to just extend that to you. But thank you very much. So many great insights that we've taken there, and we'll open everyone to continue to contribute to the Slido. And I can see people are very busily typing away there as well. So thank you. I want to welcome our next speaker, Jennifer. As the CEO of Peace Geeks, Jennifer has led the technology's nonprofit strategies to scale, working with newcomers, policymakers, technology companies, and nonprofits to create more modern, efficient, human-centered migration systems. So before joining Peace Geeks, Jen worked in peace building, living in 6 countries across 3 continents, and most recently was professor of practice at the Kroc School of Peace Studies and a visiting fellow at the Center for Women, Peace and Security at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an absolute privilege to be able to go after the speakers that have spoken tonight. And I too am going to attempt to use my personal journey to talk about some themes relevant to inspiring inclusion like Cicely did. And I hope I can just be a fraction as eloquent as they were in going through their experiences. So when I was thinking about both Lean In and inspiring inclusion, You know, I kind of settled on, you know, 3 themes: the F word, leadership, and what are we all going to do to change the world? And so that's kind of where I'm gonna take you today. Starting off, obviously, with a story. So talking about dating myself, back in the early 2000s, I too was a student of political science, agree 100% on the boring narrative of Poli-Sci 101. But I was sitting in an undergraduate class, and a white male professor asked our class for everybody who believed in, you know, or who identified as a feminist to put up their hand. And I still remember my internal dialogue going, you know, it was ping-ponging back and forth between thinking like, oh my God, am I a feminist? No, it's a bad word. That's a bad thing. And I, you know, fundamentally, it came down to the fact that I didn't really know what the hell a feminist was. But I knew that it was bad. It was, there was something bad, and maybe I shouldn't put up my hand right then. So needless to say, if I even did put up my hand, I think it was one of those, like, maybe like right at the end of the place where everybody else had a backbone and courage and knew what it was, had put up their hand. But there were very, very few people in that room who did, first and foremost. So then I go home at the end of my day, and I come from a really big family, a big blended family, lots of foster siblings and half brothers and sisters. And my oldest brother, who was over 12 years my senior, at the time he was in the Navy, but he was also quite punk. I tell him this story about like, oh, my prof today was asking who is a feminist. And he just looked at me like I was an idiot. And of course, that's not what you want your big brother to do when they look at you. But he basically is like, well, you know, do you believe in equal rights? And I was like, oh yeah, of course I believe in equal rights. And do you believe that you should be able to make your own choices? And I was like, well, yeah, of course. He's like, yeah, congratulations, you're a feminist. And I was about as blunt a way as this phenomenal icon would say that we, you know, women, especially women identifying folks, have 2 choices. You can be a feminist or you can be a masochist, which I think is a funny tongue-in-cheek way of bringing what was a pretty politicized concept then, and I think still to an extent is now, into clarity for me. That ended up turning into what became both a personal and a professional vocation around gender equality, power dynamics, politics, systems of violence and oppression, human rights, and then eventually into peace building. My peace building journey started in West Africa when I went to work for a very small civil society organization in the Upper East region of Ghana, led by this woman, the woman in the beautiful yellow halo, Madame Margaret Mary Asaka. She was both the founder and the executive director of an organization she founded called Sensudi, and she was also an elder in the community of Bolga Tanga. And over the course of 6 months while I was there, she taught me in different words and different frames, you know, things that I would apply academic labels to later, but really what was the core of positionality, power dynamics between international funders and local communities, neocolonialism, intersectionality, and the foundation of what I would later be able to identify as feminisms, which is to say that she really challenged my very naive Western-centric view of what feminism was, and helped me understand that feminism, first and foremost, was neither Western in origin, nor monolithic in its concept. And if we consider feminism as being about women and gender diverse people having as much agency and self-determination over their rights, their bodies, their power, both individually and as a collective, then feminisms are actually as diverse and culturally relevant as the diversity within all of our human societies. And this became particularly significant when I started working in international peace building, and specifically looking at studying, in particular, the voices and presence that were not part of peace processes. There's a saying in peace processes and peace negotiations that peace negotiations are fundamentally a bunch of bad men talking to another bunch of bad men to divvy up power over a country that they have ravaged. And that the way to guarantee yourself a seat at the table is to commit unspeakable atrocities. So unsurprisingly, the result is that over 50% of peace agreements fail within the first 3 years. So my work in what I would now consider to be EDI and leadership for that matter started there. It started working with and learning from, you want to talk about mentorship, incredible women leaders from conflict zones around the world who, knowing their histories, knowing their religions, knowing their cultures, had created interventions within the conflicts that they were experiencing, that they and their communities were experiencing, and had created effective peace initiatives, whether that was everything from decommissioning child soldiers to actually negotiating peace agreements to decommissioning weapons and everything else in between. So that was the privilege of my career for over 12 years was getting to sit at the feet of these women, everybody from Nobel Peace Prize laureates to grassroots women leaders from over 56 countries around the world, and get to learn from them what the effect of having greater equity, diversity, and inclusion in peace processes could do in terms of increasing their efficacy and benefiting all of society. As I think everybody on this call knows, women's equality, gender empowerment, feminism for that matter, doesn't just benefit women, it benefits everyone. It benefits all of society. And so those were the women that I got to learn from, and they taught me innumerable things. We don't have enough time on this session for me to enumerate everything that I learned from them, and I'm fortunate to still call them friends. But one, that advancing equality is first and foremost noticing who's not in the room. It's noticing for who is in the room, who's not speaking. It's noticing for who is speaking, who's taking up all of the airtime. It's also not, as Starrlee mentioned right at the beginning, speaking for the women who are not present. One of the phrases that really irks me is this idea of giving voice to the voiceless, which still proliferates some charity and nonprofit work around the world. There's no such thing. It's about creating space and the enabling conditions for women to speak for themselves, as Starrlee said, as and how they want to. And lastly, it's recognizing and supporting women's leadership can't be premised on women having to fit into one mold of feminism, one mold of gender equality, one mold of leadership. Maintaining and promoting a single model of women's empowerment just serves to reinforce the hegemonic power dynamics that have closed space for all of us for years, for centuries. Which brings me to my favorite topic: what can we do to change the world? I have felt incredibly fortunate that is what my career has gotten to be focused on. And in the conflict-divided societies and the resulting humanitarian crises that I've spent my career working on, from Northern Ireland to the Great Lakes region of East Africa in particular, the injustice and discrimination all comes down to systemic inequality and the belief that people do not have equal rights. And I don't believe that we should ever take peace and societal cohesion for granted, not in any of the countries that are currently affected by conflict, and not in countries in Europe, the United States, or here in Canada. So my current work is as the CEO of Peace Geeks, which is an international technology nonprofit. Canada is the fastest growing G7 nation, due to immigration. And by 2034, 100% of our population growth is going to be due to immigration. And even though, globally speaking, we have a world-renowned immigration system, 77% of newcomers are not accessing the government-funded free services and information that are available to them in their first year, slowing down and impeding perhaps a smoother settlement journey that they could have access to. So Peace Geeks works by using technology to set newcomers up for success and be able to access their fuller potential more quickly. And the failure to do so, I mean, that's the problem we're solving, but the cost of not solving that problem is a cost not only for newcomers, to come back to what I mentioned before, but to Canadian society as a whole, to our businesses, to our communities, to every single part of society where humans are thriving. And I was not at all surprised to see that so many of the speakers tonight are ourselves, either first or generation, second generation immigrants or newcomers to Canada. So my work right now, just to wrap up, is in EDI is twofold. First of all, as an organization, our mission is to help Canada foster a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive society, period, in companies everywhere. And we do that through connecting newcomers, refugees, immigrants, foreign, international students, temporary foreign workers, everybody, to free multilingual information and resources so that they can guide their own immigration journey and be able to do that in the palm of their hand. Intimately connected to that goal. I don't know, maybe there's somebody who doesn't have their computer muted, and I love hearing kids in the background, so I don't actually mind, but so intimately connected to that goal is the fact that we're a tech nonprofit. And for any of you who have worked in the tech sector, you know that it is an extremely white, extremely male sector. And the impact of that demographic, of that majority demographic, is seen across all of our digital spaces, spaces that were not designed by diverse peoples, and as a result are often by design not accessible, not necessarily safe spaces for BIPOC peoples, for diverse genders, for diverse abilities. And so Peace Geeks seeks to address those two challenges in two ways. First and foremost, we try to do it through human-centered design. Some of the photos here are of our user interviews, which we do constantly. And a lot of the advocacy that we end up doing with other tech companies and other immigrant-serving organizations in this space is to talk about this centrality, the vital importance of not developing technology in a vacuum, making sure that diverse perspectives and the voices and perspectives in particular of your intended users are part of the design from the beginning. And so we do that. And then we also do it on my team. We value and prioritize lived experience. Tokenism as an EDI strategy does not work, as I'm sure everybody here well knows. So we prioritize lived experience, but then we also carry that through after hiring to make sure that lived experience is something that it intentionally is used to benefit our design, our product, our engineering, our leadership teams, including our board members. We want people to bring those lived experiences to benefit the work that we're doing, both as an organization, as team members to support one another, and then also to support the digital tools that we create for society. And then lastly, we try to amplify and support the work of others that are doing work in this space. So we work with organizations like the YWCA Tech Connect program, the Women Economics Council, her mentorship program. We have our own low barrier digital mentorship platform that each have specific ways and strategies to ensure that those mentorship opportunities can be accessed and are gender sensitive and inclusive to support women and to support racialized women, newcomers, and refugees so that we can have a greater pipeline both of successful newcomers and specifically successful newcomers in tech in Canada to change those spaces for all of us. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. And I really look forward to the questions. Juliet, I think you may be muted.
Thank you. And the questions are shaping up, by the way, so feel free to continue to put the questions there, and we'll hopefully have some speakers to be able to answer those questions. Dashella is basically going to take us home. Dashella Taylor holds a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering and MBA, and is currently director of the Optical Business Unit, Planning and Product Management Division at Fujitsu Network Communications, where she has responsibility for defining software and hardware requirements to drive Fujitsu's optical transmission portfolio. Dashella has over 25 years of experience in telecommunications, and she has been a leader in a leadership role at Fujitsu for over 15 years. Welcome to the stage, Dashella.
Thank you. And I just want to say the dynamic speakers today, I feel honored. I thank Lean In Canada. I thank all you amazing speakers for your stories. Everybody has their personal stories, and yours were phenomenal. I just hope that I can live up to kind of share my story. So I really appreciate it. I do bring you greetings from the United States of America because I'm based out of Dallas, Texas. I think I may be the only one on the panel from the USA. So I bring you greetings from Texas. And as we've all talked about tonight, inspiring inclusion is what I want to focus regarding my journey. And the value of women. We've heard from some powerful women today and their story. And there's a huge value in what women can contribute. And just to close out a little bit about myself, as they said, I have an engineering background. I've been in telecommunications for a very long time. I'm a mother of 3. I have a wealth of engineering and math related family members in my family. And I'm just honored to be here to kind of share my journey with all of you. So thanks for having me. The first thing I would like to say is that, you know, at the end of, as we look at just kind of, I talk about diversity and inclusion a lot. I do a lot of speaking engagements. And quite honestly, I always want to focus on, and I think, let me just make sure that I advanced. Okay, first, my facts and figures. I think some of you may have shared some facts and figures, but let me focus on a few that kind of resonated with me. So 4%, only 4% of C-level management are women of color. So as a woman of color, I'm a minority, I'm a woman, I'm Black. That is a very small number. It has grown a little bit, but 4% are at a C-level management level for women of color. And 10% of Fortune 500 companies are CEOs, which are women. We have 58% of women that make up the workforce in 2024. And then finally, 35%, women represent 35% of STEM in the workplace today. So just let that settle on. We've made some great progress from women's, you know, aspirations and where we have landed today, but there's much more work to be done for the advancement of women, but we have come a long way. So as I mentioned, I just wanted to kind of share a few quotes that resonate with me, because I think it's important for all of us to just remember that inclusion and inspiring inclusion is so critical in our, not only in the workplace, but in our community as a whole. So the first one is just inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. I honestly believe it is a necessity of recognizing the incredible strengths that each of us, and we've heard from several women tonight, that we can bring to the table. And then the beauty of diversity is in the inclusion. We can talk about diversity, but we have to be included. That's why I say diversity is being invited to the party. I want to be invited to the party. I have to show up. But inclusion is truly being asked to dance and participate at the party. And then finally, the more girls and women we have in STEM, because I have a STEM background, the more we can solve problems of the future. Because I think it does start with women. We are phenomenal. You heard from some phenomenal stories today, and I think it does start with women leaders. And then I want to start a little bit and share a little bit about my path, my journey, and essentially tell you how I became an engineer. I started from an early spark, and just to kind of make you understand, I had a curiosity and inspiration from engineering, mainly because my mother is a math teacher. So she's a math genius. I had math in my blood. I love math. I love science growing up as a teenager. And I had several uncles and cousins who were engineers. So I figured, I love math. You know, I love science. I have family members that I see that are either mathematics majors and or engineers. So that sparked my interest to pursue an engineering career. Now, I will tell you, I went to Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm a native of Louisiana in the US. And I had a lot of challenges during my first years in college. And I want to share this, and a few of you have echoed some of these things, but I want to make sure people understand sometimes where you end up, the journey is a tough journey. So people always say, well, Dashella, how can I become a director or leader like you? You've been in telecommunications, that's a male, white dominated field. How did you do it? Well, it wasn't easy. It was not easy. So some of the challenges that I faced, you know, in my college journey was that we had limited female representation. And I often felt isolated. I mean, it was a male dominated field being in engineering, and I rarely saw women in that field. So I felt isolated, I felt alone. I had difficulty finding study groups to help foster my learning. I didn't have women that I felt connected to. And I felt it was challenging to actually, you know, physically try to find study groups. I constantly needed to prove my competency over and over and over again because they're stereotypes, they're biases. You're a female, why are you in engineering? You're Black, why are you in engineering? And then we had no female professors. So I didn't see people that looked like me. And that was very isolating. So that journey in college was very, it was tough. And there were times when I did want to give up and I wanted to change my major. And I said, well, let me just go into education. Maybe I'll be a teacher. But at the same time, I loved engineering and I knew that I could accomplish it, but there were challenges. And then when we talk about present day and kind of where I've landed today as a Black African-American woman in corporate America, my career started early, and I launched my career as a field service engineer in telecommunications at Alcatel. So let me explain to you just a little bit about what that is. When you're in the field, you're actually setting up equipment, getting communications customers like AT&T and Verizon and Comcast to kind of transfer their equipment and provide service. So let me tell you, I had the jeans, I had the hard hat. I went in and it was completely male dominated. I mean, there were no women. I often got looked at with stares of, why are you even here? I was Black, I was a woman, they were white, they were men. It was awful, right? To just try to find myself in the competency that I knew that I had, but I still felt isolated, even early in my career. And to date, I am, you know, as an engineer today, I proudly broke a lot of those barriers, but it wasn't easy because I felt like I had to always outwork my counterparts who were male. Always. I had to work the extra hours. I had to ask for more assignments. I had to advocate for myself. I had to do so much to focus on my growth and show that I deserved a seat at the table that it was daunting. But I will say this, I've been with Fujitsu Network Communications based out of Texas for 24 years. It's been my professional home for a very long time. It's a company that innovates a lot of great technology, and I love my job. I love innovating. I love understanding what our customers' requirements are and going work with our engineering team to develop innovative solutions. So it's a great professional home, but it didn't start out that way. I had to advocate myself, make sure people understood that I wanted to be a leader. Things don't just necessarily come to you to be a leader because you think you should be a leader. You have the criteria, the skill sets, or the knowledge to do it. So I had to constantly demonstrate leadership skills, my technical expertise, and that I'm trying to, you know, focus on dedicating myself to excellence. And I had to do that repeatedly, year over year over year. And then finally, you get an opportunity. You get an opportunity and you're grateful for the opportunity. But a lot of times, if I did not advocate for myself, I would not have had an opportunity or a seat at the table to be in a leadership position. So when you talk about a leadership journey, since I have over 14 plus years or so experience leading teams, very diverse teams. And even when I started to be a leader, no one looked like me. There were no women that I led. There were no Blacks that I led. I led a bunch of white men or Indian men or Asian men. And they looked at me like, you're a woman and you're Black and you're trying to tell us what to do and you're trying to lead this organization. Well, yes. So we had to settle in. We had to settle in. And over time, you start to continue to prove yourself as a leader because people don't naturally respect women just because you're in a leadership role. So it took you a long time to get to the leadership role. And then when you're in the leadership role, you still have to work to gain respect. So my journey was not easy to get to the leadership role. And even when you're in the leadership role initially, it takes some time to get some of that respect that is ultimately deserved. Okay. So I did thrive as a leader. I've been a leader for many years now, starting as a manager, director, senior director. I've gone through a lot of different positions. And in those positions, I've had successful teams that we are trying to be more inclusive as I grow my team, because I want to have a diverse group of people with diverse ideas. And that is what I've been trying to do as a leader over 15 years now. So my journey has been filled with ups and downs. It was a journey to even get into this arena. And now that I'm in the arena, I'm thriving, but I want to make sure everybody else understands that it's not always easy to get to your final outcome, right? And if you want to continue to grow. And then in closing, I just want to leave you with kind of three notes, the three personal notes that I take for me every day. I've always told you, I've always told everybody that all this time I've thought about my brand. People always say, well, what do you mean by your brand? Well, when I've been in corporate America, I always want my brand to reflect who I am, my strong work ethics, my integrity, my ability to lead and be a good contributor, a good team maker. And at the end of the day, you have to have a strong brand. So the three things I want to leave you with that were very instrumental in my journey was inclusion does drive success. So I share with you a little bit about my journey as an African-American woman in engineering. And I think that has brought richness and inclusion and a sense of embracing within the organization at Fujitsu. All these years, I think it's been a very good dynamic for the organizations that I have been a part of because I bring that diversity. Then inclusion is essential for growth. If you don't have inclusion, you don't have representation from all walks of life, I think it's very difficult to be successful. So being included, created an environment where I did feel respected. I did feel valued. I wanted to empower success. And I think it started showing that we were more successful because of inclusion. And then finally, resilience and determination. If I had not been resilient from the time I entered engineering school as an 18-year-old, I would not be here today. So you have to be resilient. There has to be that sense of determination. And you have to advocate for yourself. A lot of times for you to be recognized and for you to be included. Sometimes it's not just going to happen naturally, and it should, but we have to be our own advocate as well as good mentors. I think someone spoke about mentors. I think that is so critical along our journey. So I'll leave you with that and the importance of inclusion and that power of resilience. And that's important. That's been instrumental in my journey through my career as well as my, before I entered my career. So thank you. And hopefully everybody stayed awake because we're done with the speaker. So thank you guys for your time. And thank you again, Lena in Canada. I appreciate it.
Stay awake. Are you kidding? We're jumping out of our chairs here. We've got goosebumps and shivers going on. Thank you so much. Amazing. And I think that brings us to our first question. And Dashella, since you ended on the note of the mentorship piece, I think that it makes sense that you could take this first question with the, and it's here because we have had about 4 people that have upvoted the question. And the question is, can I still find a mentor when I'm in my 40s? I feel like I need one, but also I should be mentoring women in their 20s.
I think we all need mentors. If you're 20, if you're 30, 40, or 50, we all can mentor. We all need mentoring, right? Because if you don't need a mentor, that to me, you've already reached your peak and that you have no more to grow or learn from anyone. So I think it's important that we have mentors, no matter where you are in your career, no matter what your age is. And even if you're not a mentor, I think that's okay too. But I want to make sure that, and I have a mentor now, and I've been in my career for a very long time. I have a senior vice president today. He's a male, but he is my mentor. And honestly, I rely on him to bounce ideas. I've learned a lot from him. I've grown from him. But it doesn't matter your age or where you are in your career, because I think we all can use mentors because we continually want to grow. And so I think it's still important to have a mentor no matter where you are in your career.
Agreed. Do any of the other panelists want to speak to that one? Jennifer, I see you there.
I was just going to echo. I mean, I think Dashella just said it perfectly. Dashella, did I pronounce your name?
Yes, you got
Yes,
it.
awesome, good. I mean, that was perfect. I agree 100%. We should always be learning. There's always somebody, whether it's in your sector or maybe a sector adjacent to you. I mean, some of the best mentors I've had have been in their 60s and 70s, and you know, again, I'm still looking. I'm mentoring, and I'm always still looking. So yeah, she said it perfectly.
Yep. And before I move on to the next question, I will add on to that I only received my mentor about 3 years ago, and it was someone that I pursued. So I was taking a course at actually University of British Columbia on diversity and inclusion, and my professor there was just so amazing that I wrote a letter that was very intentional, and she is my mentor to this day. And you're absolutely right that, you know, I should also be mentoring others. However, I have a belief that we give from a position of overflow, and that's an opportunity for us to get back as well. So, and when you're being mentored, by the way, I think everyone here could agree that the mentors that I have and the mentoring that I do, I get just as much back in that relationship as the mentor as I do when I'm the mentee. Okay, so the next question was, how do I find a sponsor? Again, we know this is more challenging in today's hybrid world. I see my male colleagues with no mentors keep getting promoted due to strong sponsorship with senior leaders. Laura, I see you took yourself off mute.
Yeah, happy to answer this question. I think it's important for women at any stage in their career to really utilize their network. So if someone were to ask me this question and say, hey, I really want a sponsor or a mentor in my career, I see the men around me getting promoted, I would say reach out intentionally to at least 5 people in your network. Ask for a coffee date, ask to take them to lunch, ask to have a Zoom meeting, you know, get to know people, not with the intention of I want something from you, but with the intention of building your network. And I think this is the difference between men and women as they rise through leadership, is that men have sort of an automatic network and just by way of association, where women, as many people said tonight, didn't have people above them that looked like them, that didn't represent who they were. And so our network is smaller just by nature of who we are. It doesn't mean that we can't build it though, and we can't foster it. And sometimes our mentors are not within our field either. So don't forget about the women that are outside your field, your industry. Those women can also be mentors.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to add something to that.
Please.
You know, when we think about sponsorship, we're really thinking about people, influential people who can advocate for you, you know, at talent review tables when roles are available and things of that nature. And so, if you have an opportunity, even outside of your day-to-day job, to work closely with a senior leader, whether it is through something like an ERG or by volunteering for special projects, that's another way to be able to display what you're capable of and what you're good at to a leader who might have some influence and be able to advocate for you when those opportunities arise.
Yeah, I love that. Dashella, I think I saw you put yourself off mute. Did you want to add something to that?
No, that was perfect.
Yeah.
That was perfect.
Okay, excellent. All right, before I move on to the next question, I did want to highlight, if you take a look at Keenan, you'll see that the painting is shaping out quite beautifully, and we do still have the opportunity to bid on it. I think I have 6 minutes left on it, and there's also digital copies with a donation of $50 or more. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, the next question that we have is, how do I no longer feel that I'm losing out on growth opportunities and recognition because I am a woman of color? How do you beat the rejection fatigue? Does anyone want to go on? Go ahead, Reena.
Juliet, at this one, you sometimes can't. The reality is sometimes you can't beat rejection fatigue, but you can continue to learn from rejection. You may encounter 9 thanks but no thanks, and then that number 10 is the one that will be the most impactful growth opportunity for you. So you'll end up giving 110% to one opportunity, even though your success rate is 10%. It's really hard to beat. I think because you're thinking you want to beat rejection fatigue, the harder you try to do it, the more fatigued you become. I think embrace the fatigue and know that what's actually the most impactful is the fact that you even tried. A lot of people don't even try because they fear rejection. So continue. You'll find the right opportunity. You're learning about yourself. There's a lot of self-awareness in every single rejection, and there's so much self-reflection when you look back and see what you failed at. So I think just, again, gain that humility, keep going forward. Don't try to fight the fatigue, go with the flow. And before you know it, everything's going to fall into place.
Thank you. I'll also add on to that one of the things that I have noticed is that a lot of times we get fatigue when we are rejected, and we feel like it is a rejection that is for us, and so it really brings us down. And I think that what's helped me in the past is that I've looked at it as I need to push forward because I'm actually advocating for other individuals that look like me and who come behind me, and so that gives me a little more energy to say that I'm actually doing something that's highlighting an issue for the organization and not just for myself. So I'm fighting for all the women and actually helping the organization to be identify a sore spot, specifically that might affect other women of color. I have a question here about the stairs analogy. I can't recall which one of us used the stairs analogy. Where would you suggest we look for allies? What kind of events or organizations? Does anyone have any suggestions other than lean in, of course? Yeah. Okay. So what I can say to that is that I also happen to sit on the board of an organization called the National Association for Asian American Professionals. I have probably learned more there than about my own ethnicity than anywhere else. And there's lots of other diverse and ethnic associations. So that might be something to take into consideration. And does Lean in Canada offer mentorship programs? Well, that one we don't. Lean in Canada at the moment doesn't have it. It's something that we're looking into. Again, Lean in Canada is 100% volunteer led. And so we are looking to offer more programs like that one. mentorship program. But again, we need to be able to get to a place where we can put the time in for it. And then, I think I know exactly the person who's going to answer this one, but how do you inspire newcomers in Canada? Is Jennifer there?
Yep.
Potentially, this is a great one for you. How do you inspire newcomers in Canada?
I mean, that's a really big question in terms of, I think, I don't know. I think the newcomers to Canada should inspire all of us. But if I'm talking with refugees or immigrants or newcomers who are particularly worn down by all the systemic barriers and the naivete and this absolutely ridiculous myth of Canadian experience that some companies are still throwing out there, though I'm really happy to see some provinces beginning to outlaw requiring that for newcomers to Canada. But I mean, I guess I just try to keep reminding them that that it is to the company's loss and it is to the society's loss that these barriers are in place, and then doing whatever I can to connect them with the circles, the communities, the peer-to-peer network, other immigrants and newcomers who have been where they have. There's some great networks out there, peer networks that just basically connect people who are newly arriving or about to arrive to Canada with people who've been here for, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 30 years, and saying, look, I was where you are. And all of us know that nepotism still or at least connections, help open so many doors, formally and informally. And so opening up those networks to new Canadians is so important. So again, just trying to do what was already shared around trying to not let rejection fatigue, trying to not let isolation, which I think so many newcomers felt, especially it was exacerbated so badly in the pandemic. But it continues, perpetually, no matter where you are and what country you move to, especially if there are language barriers and others. So connecting, helping people feel a sense of belonging and community.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add on to that? Okay, I'm going to close out with our last question. And it is, what do you do if you were hired for a senior controller, but your role was downgraded after a year, which affected your bonus allocation? I don't know. Does anyone want to grab that one?
I can take that, Juliet. So I'm not sure exactly what the job is for a senior controller, but generally speaking, if I think it's a matter of, do you like what you do or not? If you do and you do it with passion, you continue. If you don't, I always say that if a door closes, another one opens, and go for it, go for other opportunities. But if you love what, it all depends on your personal situation. And again, it's the passion that you have for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you to all of our speakers. Before we close out, I wanted to go to our artist and have him just explain to us a little bit about the piece that he's created, and then we'll close out with a thank you. So please stay tuned. Keenan, so tell us about this beautiful piece of art that you have there.
Thank you so much for asking, Juliet. And before we dive in, I just want to say thank you to Lean Canada and to you, Juliet, for giving me the great honor to share the stage with such amazing women here today. And, I've learned so much about, and so much resonated with me as well, about non-traditional paths or resilience. And I think I relate to a lot of it's really difficult because the painting is over there behind me. So it's a little difficult to see, but I can overhear. And I think so myself, as a gay man coming from a Muslim country who moved to Canada to escape building myself, I've also, I find that I have my own weight to bear, and I resonate a lot with stories like this that are shared because it gives individuals like myself more hope for tomorrow, and talking about new immigrants and talking about all of these struggles. And I know there was also a mention, and it takes me back to my culture of no one will marry you if your rotis are not round, that little about the rotis. So let's dive into the piece. So I'm so happy I was able to finish this on time, and this is my artist statement. So in a world of professional women empowerment, this artwork seeks to, embody this essence of inclusivity as well as collective progress. So they're moving forward. So inspired by the ethos of Lean In Canada, where women unite to propel their careers and their lives forward, I wanted to make some sort of visual narrative that celebrates this diversity, equity, and inclusion. So at the heart of the theme, Inspire Inclusion, there's such a belief in, understanding, valuing, and embracing women's voices and experiences through my art. And I aim to foster a sense of belonging, relevance, empowerment for all women, transcending boundaries and, forging connections. So this piece serves as, a piece of reflection and contemplation, with little snippets and quotes in the background, as I said earlier in the piece, from the actual book, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And these words really speak about, even while painting and listening to this, I was like, I could see little words in the background, and it's just so cool how it all comes together. But it talks about resilience, determination, talks about leadership. It defines, professional women. And I didn't start this piece, like I did have this, in the background as well. Now, the first thing that hits the eye of this composition is the series of women's faces painted in the vibrant hues of the rainbow. And they're layered one upon each other, moving forward. So these faces, they symbolize the diversity that we have within our communities, especially here in Canada. And they reflect so many different experiences, so many different backgrounds, perspectives that contribute to our collective strength, because it does come together as one main art piece. Now, when I was drawing this out, I wanted to very intentionally make them all look the same, but notice that they're not all the perfect same line. Not all the women, have the same experiences, and it's important to pull each other up. So as we come together to champion equity, diversity, and inclusion, this artwork invites you, the viewer, to embark on your own journey of introspection and action. Together, we have the power to inspire inclusion and shape a more inclusive world for women, and for everyone. Thank you.
Keenan, I want to keep what you just said, and I'm glad that we recorded it, because that was a piece of art as well. Thank you so much for donating your time. And I do have to share that today happens to be National or International Poetry Day. So there you go, Keenan. Thank you very much for that bit of poetry. And I did not notice the printing behind it. So thank you so much for pointing that out. All right, so we're going to close out this amazing evening. Thank you to all of you who came. And I'm going to look to see if I can announce the winner of the painting in just a moment. And please note that there are still digital copies that are available. But I'm going to welcome Stacey Dakin just to the floor for a moment. And she's going to close us out. So if you're there, Stacey.
I'm here. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacey. I'm the president of the board of directors of Lean In Canada. And for those who are in Montreal, I'm actively looking to launch Lean In Montreal. So if you need mentors or you need some networking here in Montreal, we're looking to find you. So reach out, and Stacey@leanincanada.com. I want to take a moment to thank everybody who came tonight, to our amazing speakers, to Keenan, our artists. That was like, how do you follow that? I get to close, but really you should have dropped the mic at that point. Our sponsor, Bernie Group, and finally the organizing committee, our host, Juliet, who got us through tonight, but also got us through planning the last couple of weeks. Our speaker liaison, Kayla from Lean In Toronto, the vice president of Lean In Toronto, and our chat and technical coordinator, Fernanda, from Lean In Vancouver, Vice President of Lean In Vancouver. Our event project manager, Amrita Argawal from Lean In, also the president there, and Melanie Guzman, who is on vacation this week. So she's missing the event that she's been working months and months to coordinate, but she is the new events coordinator for the Lean In board, and only joined us maybe 2 months before she started organizing this event. So she's not here, but thank you to her. Thank you all. Back to you, Juliet, to learn who's winning tonight.
Thank you. So I'm not able to grab it at this moment, but we will be sure to definitely announce it. And then what I'll also, Fernanda, if you can bring up just the Slido that just shows the contributions that everyone made, that would be great. And then I'm going to ask you there's a survey there. If any, again, the community here is built 100% of volunteers. It's hard to imagine that we were able to secure such amazing speakers and with and an amazing artist, such an amazing artist. But the way that you can thank us is by taking a look at that survey and just scanning the QR code and then sending us your feedback, because that is really for us the best thank you. And I think that I will just close us out, and like I said, we'll let you know who won, and then we'll also share with you the Slido contributions that you made there. There it is right there. There were some amazing contributions there, as well as we'll capture some of the additional notes that we have from the speakers. So from Lean In Canada to you, thank you very much. I hope you have an amazing evening. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Yay.